Greetings and salutations, Al Iverson here. Community engagement, industry, something, something person for Valamail. I kind of do weird stuff with data and community and industry stuff, active in those different industry groups like IETF and MOG and that sort of thing. Today, I am joined by two very special guests from our product support team, Val and Cornell. Would you guys like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. So my name is Valentin. I've been with ValueMail I'm going on 7 years now, actually. So from 2019, um, I'm a senior technical account manager. So I usually do DMARC onboardings for large companies. And I'm based in Romania, Transylvania. Just nice to meet everybody.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me already, my name is Cornell. Hello, Brett. Brett here is one of our existing customers actually, and I had the pleasure to work with him. I've been with Volleymail for the past 5+ years, and yeah, on a daily basis, that's pretty much what I'm doing. I'm helping people achieve enforcement, stay secured, and get their emails delivered accordingly. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. A couple of housekeeping notes for you all. Please feel free to throw your questions or feedback either in the Q&A or in the chat. We are happy to answer your questions along the way. We'll try to keep an eye out here for them. In fact, I will even make sure I can see my Q&A window so I don't miss any of the questions that as they come in. And and I made it fill the whole screen. My God, technology is hard. No, really, I'm smart, I promise. Another housekeeping note here is yes, we will share the recording. Every webinar I've ever done in the past 15 years, somebody will ask in the chat, will you be sharing the recording? Yes, I promise you, we will share the recording. We here at Valamail put recorded webinars up on YouTube, and we don't even gate them. So it's happy. We're happy to share them around and send them to your friends or enemies depending on whether or not you think they're good or bad. And so we'll send a follow-up email with a link to this. Or, like I said, if you somehow miss that, you can go looking for these on YouTube and you will find them on our YouTube channel. So here's what we're going to talk about today. It might be obvious to some that we're talking about DMARC, but hey, we always get the question, what actually is DMARC? Just about every webinar I've done. And that's okay because not everybody knows what this technology is or what you do with it. And so let me kick it off with a quick description of what DMARC is. And DMARC is a thing for your domain. DMARC is a setting for your domain. Basically, at its core, DMARC is something that lets you, as a domain owner, tell the world what to do when email says it's from you, but doesn't pass authentication checks. So the goal here is to prevent people from spoofing your domain, to phish your employees, to phish your customers, send spam to wreck your domain reputation, to try to pretend that they are you in a way that might get them to be trusted when they shouldn't be trusted, or might get them to the inbox when they don't deserve the inbox. And so ultimately, that is what DMARC helps you protect against. And DMARC's kind of got three bits to it, three very important things to it. It's got the authentication component. It's based on top of existing email authentication protocols, Sender Policy Framework, SPF, and DKIM, Domain Keys Identified Mail. So basically, this third level on top of email authentication lets you tell the world that, hey, I authenticate all the mail from my domain. Then the second part of that, the second tier here is reporting, so that you can make sure that you've got it configured right. You can see all of the services out there sending mail as you and be able to alert or otherwise recognize if you've got a sending service set up, but you don't have email authentication set up properly. Or even more importantly, what if somebody is out there in the world sending email as your domain, pretending to be you? That DMARC reporting that comes back, this aggregate reporting that comes back from all of the big mailbox providers, lots of them all over the world, starting with the biggest ones, Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, all the way down from there. There's a whole bunch of them. They send reports back to the domain owner saying, hey, we saw this mail that came to our system, or somebody attempted to send to our systems, and it's purported to be from you. Did it pass? Did it fail? What was the source IP? What did we do with it? Did we let it through? Did we reject it? And so we take all of that data that comes in that aggregate reporting in the ValidMail platform, and we build you a map that shows you where in the world people are sending mail on your behalf, and we help you build a list of services, platforms that are sending mail on your behalf. Let you manage and authorize that too, so you can say, "Oh yeah, Salesforce Marketing Cloud is an allowed service. We're going to let that mail through. We'll make sure that it's in the SPF record. We'll manage the DKIM keys for that." Or maybe we just stopped using a platform, like we no longer use Aweber. So we're going to take those DKIM keys out of DNS because we don't want to leave it so that there's some dangling bit of access that somebody could get into later and send mail as you. Basically, whatever you don't leave behind or set up or accessible cannot be hacked. So that reporting component is really important there to be able to tell what sending services are in play, who's sending mail as you, legitimate or not. And then finally, policy. What should a mailbox provider, a Yahoo, a Google, a Microsoft, do with messages that fail authentication checks? Now, the risk when you set up DMARC is that you don't authenticate, you haven't already configured authentication for all of your mail. So if you don't authenticate all of your mail and you turn on DMARC and you set it to an enforcement posture, a very restrictive setting to say, reject everything if it purports to be from me, but it's not really from me. The risk there is that if you missed some service, you're telling the world to reject mail that could actually be legitimate. So that's the one of the primary oops, right? We're going to talk about a lot of ways things can go wrong with DMARC setup. That is, in my opinion, the main one. The starting one is people jump to reject without making sure that they're aware of and they've cataloged all of their sending services. So that's why there's these different levels of policy. And most people, when they're doing things right, they go from basically good, better, best, starting with none. No, don't, you're telling mailbox providers, don't do anything with specific to whether or not mail is failing authentication checks, failing DMARC checks, just report on it. And then you can kind of go up from there to more restrictive policies. Quarantine. Put it in a quarantine folder, put it in a spam folder, or examine it more closely. Some systems might have sort of a trust score or a spam score mechanism, and that can affect that. And then finally, the highest tier, the most protective tier for that is reject. That policy of reject tells the world, hey, if a message says it's from me, but it doesn't pass auth checks, don't let it in the door, reject it outright. And that's how you stop a very significant type of phishing and spoofing. Not always, right? Because you got to think of if you lock a door, it doesn't mean that somebody can't break in a window. I've had, frankly, will own up to a limitation of DMARC here, and that sometimes people will say, well, they can just use another domain. They can still spoof and try to get through, and they can make a lookalike domain and something else. Yes, but, and that's where it comes into play that yes, somebody can still find another way to try to deliver an unwanted or scary or a malicious email to you. But do you want to let them into the inbox with your domain and the from address? To me, that feels like a no-brainer. Why would you not want to protect your domain, even though there's other ways bad actors could still find a way to try to get through? It's part of your overall security posture. It's part of what you need to do when you're doing email security properly. It's not the only thing, it's just part of it. It's a very important part of it. So, and it's very niche, right? It's you've got cybersecurity, and then you've got email security, and then you've got domain protection, and it's this little tiny thing, but it's very important. And not only from a security perspective, but also because mailbox providers are mandating it because it helps them in their efforts to block unwanted and malicious email. And so they tie it to bulk email sender requirements to help drive adoption of it. Boy, that was a mouthful. And now I just talked about mailbox provider requirements for those. This is what I like to call Maggie. Maggie stands for Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Yahoo. Now, this is a little matrix of the modern sender requirements, a snapshot of some of those modern sender requirements that the mailbox providers have announced over the past couple of years. This sort of modern set of sender requirements probably first started happening in October 2023 when Yahoo and Google announced that these were coming. And these are really things that were, with my background in email deliverability, these are things that were always kind of known as best practices, as things smart senders, good senders would want to do to be able to get mail delivered to the inbox. But this modern version of them sort of translates them to actual written mandates. Now they've all published pages specifically calling out that these things are required. And with me focusing specifically on email authentication and DMARC, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. So not only have they sort of upgraded what they're doing here, but they are also rejecting mail that doesn't comply with these requirements. And you look at this, a lot of this is consumer oriented. So if you're B2B sender, you might think, well, am I exempt from this? And short answer is no, you're not, because while a lot of the mailbox providers started this with their consumer domains like Gmail, first applied these requirements to mail going to gmail.com subscribers, their goal at the end of the day is to protect all of their users, whether they be business users or your aunt or cousin or friend or grandma's personal email account. They want to protect all of it, and they know that these requirements are the best way to do that. And so whatever is on here is either already a B2B requirement too, or will be at some point. So there's limited sort of wiggle room here to sort of get through and try to sidestep these. That's one of the great evolutions of sending email over these past years is loopholes and exceptions are shrinking and closing. So net here is email authentication and DMARC and all this happy stuff are required when you're sending email. So let's talk about what do you do with DMARC? How do you do DMARC? DMARC is just a text record in DNS. And I wonder here if we can, I'm going to share a browser here. This is where it will go horribly wrong. And we'll go to my little Wombat mail tester here. We'll look up a DMARC record for a domain. We'll look it up. We'll even look it up for my little spam news source newsletter. Comes up here with DMARC is just a text record in DNS, right? And so for a hobbyist, for somebody just starting out, yeah, absolutely, you can do this by yourself. You could just put that in there and just say, oh, maybe I won't have reporting go anywhere, but I'm publishing the DNS record, so I've checked the box. See, there's a lot more to it than that, and reasons why you shouldn't stop there. But if you're just trying to play around and learn about that, you can start with that. Now, for my own little spam resource domain, I can see a couple of things here where I am at P equals reject. So I'm telling the world that if mail says it's from spamresource.com but it doesn't authenticate, do not let that through. I'm also sending reporting. This is the RUA tag. This is for aggregate reporting for DMARC. And so it's going to two places. It's going to Valamail. There's an address for Valamail. And then it's also going to a mailbox at my personal domain because I'm an email nerd and I like to look at those email reports. I like to tell people that DMARC aggregate reports, the XML reporting, is almost human readable. It's not quite. It's a little bit nerdy. It's XML code and it's stuff you have to pull apart, and it's certainly not easy to generate the reporting and the maps and all the stuff that we do for you. But you can sort of look at it and see, oh, there's source IP addresses, there's state. So if you're an email geek and you want to dig more into DMARC, it can't hurt to look at the reports and actually have them sent to you as well. I wouldn't do that as part of your permanent workflow, but if you want to geek out a little bit, it's a little bit fun. We get back to the presentation here. So why would you not necessarily want to do this yourself? And that's because it's easy to get it wrong. Like if you typo that DNS record, or if you send it to the wrong place, or what about you jump to that reject policy before you have all of the senders cataloged? Right. Cartnell, why don't you weigh in here and talk about and setting that up for like, I have 150 domains. Setting up DMARC for 150 domains manually is not a lot of fun. So I think some of our clients have many hundreds of domains too, and that gets complicated fast.
Well, my point was for the previous subject where you were talking about aggregate reports, but it goes very well with this subject as well, right? So imagine having to dig through 10,000 reports that you're getting, and maybe most of those reports have different IPs, and it's not fun without a tool that can actually ingest the data and give you a friendly interface that can tell you exactly who's sending on behalf of your domain. And then, yeah, for DMARC, obviously, if you need to set up a DMARC record for 100, 200 domains, I hope you have a good DNS host that allows you to add records in bulk. But otherwise, you're going to have to add those manually for each domain, and it's definitely not fun.
Yeah, and I even, sometimes people will say, well, yeah, I can manage that. Or, oh, thankfully, my DNS platform lets me upload a CSV for DNS changes. Okay, but you still have to track what goes into those changes. Like sometimes people will have too many things in their SPF records where they have to pull it back because SPF has a limit of 10 DNS lookups in an SPF record. So some people might manually sort of collapse down and combine their SPF record to deal with that. But what about when the stuff you put in there changes? Like Google changed the includes what goes inside of their own Gmail and Google Workspace SPF records back in December. If you were somebody who was sort of manually collapsing, manually flattening SPF records, were you aware that Google's SPF record changed and what goes inside of that changed? That's the kind of thing like, can you do it? Absolutely. Yes, you could write a tool to monitor that, manage that, but is it your core competency? Do you want to deal with that when you have bigger fish to fry? Again, because DMARC is this very important but niche, very specific little thing at the core of domain protection. Just one part of all of this bit of security stuff, big bunch of security stuff you need. So
Yeah.
why would you want to build all that and manually deal with that?
Yeah,
Um,
and I can, sorry to interrupt, Al. I can jump in here as well quickly. So, that previous slide that you had where things can go wrong. So, the first idea, jumping to enforcement without reporting or preparation, right? So that's the worst idea ever, right? So you always want to set up reporting first. Make sure you have DMARC at p equals none. See exactly what's sending on your behalf. Make sure that all those are being authenticated via SPF and DKIM, right? And only after that, start thinking about implementing an enforcement policy. And usually we don't recommend going to reject. Just go to quarantine first because that way it's easier to troubleshoot, right? Um, but yeah, never go straight to reject.
yeah. And so we're trying to make this interesting. So I'm not just reading the slides to you. Here's an example. Like, remember I said that the XML reporting is almost human readable? Right? Here's an example of a DMARC report from Microsoft. So it's got some stuff that you'd have to convert date ranges and stuff like that. And it's not always super decodable, but I can see here's my own IP address for my email sending to Microsoft and outlook.com, 12 messages for a given date range and the froms and authentication results passed. Yay. I passed email authentication. So you can kind of look at that stuff. When you need to troubleshoot it, it's there for you. But to our point, the scale of managing that across coming from different mailbox providers, reporting coming from different mailbox providers, the reporting for different domains, and reporting on it over time, right? So if you need a platform that's actually going to help you do all of that and track all of that over time and collate all of that for you, that's when you need a DMARC platform. And so, because DMARC can get a little confusing, and that's why we have our expert support team. who have a ton of experience in this space, are all email experts themselves. You heard Valentin and Cornell talk about their long experience in this space as well. I have a long experience in DMARC as well. I looked at my blog. I think the first time I wrote about DMARC was way back in 2012. So email authentication is not necessarily based on new protocols. It's stuff that's been out there for a while, but these modern updated mandates that started coming around uh, for uh, for the modern settings from Gmail, Yahoo, starting in 2023, are really what sort of pushed it. So everybody has to do this if you want to get email delivered. There's a link there too. If you want to learn more about the people on our support team and the kind of good help we give our clients, if you're wondering what is this XNND thing, that is my personal short linker domain. So you can just go make it easier to type it into a browser since you can't copy and paste it here. xnnd.com/K3UA will take you right to that article. Yeah, and good stuff in the chat there too, talking about Brett talking about going straight to reject. And yeah, I want everybody to get to reject, because the more domains that are set to P equals reject, the better protected we all are. The better protected kind of email is, right? The less opportunity there is for bad guys to spoof domains. So for me, it's never a case of don't go to reject. It's just make sure you're not accidentally shooting yourself in the foot. Like where people, like I said, the one thing that I see most often done wrong is people miss a service and then legitimate emails get rejected, and then they're upset about it, thinking that it's DMARC's fault that that happened. So that's why it's always important to sort of pay attention, make sure you're catching all the email services. So Valentine, you want to talk about an
Sure.
example of that we touched on before with your financial services company help?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Al. Yeah, so this is always the case, especially with fintech companies. They're hesitant to move to DMARC enforcement, especially due to the fear of blocking legitimate email, right? There's always that question in the back of your head. What if I block something that's actually legitimate? What's gonna happen with my customers, with my receivers? They're not gonna get their email and so on, right? So that's a legitimate fear, right? Um, but in this case, especially when you use ValueMail, right? So we have great reporting and authentication reports. So seeing that everything is passing, um, SPF it's passing, DKIM is passing, DMARC it's in the 95, 96 percentages, right? So at that point, it's like it's basically like a lack of confidence instead of fear, right? So instead of showing them over and over that everything is passing, we went the other route and just um, told the customer, hey, hypothetically, let's say something bad happens. In that case, um, we have this one-click rollback. You can always switch back, go from quarantine to P equals none again. And in that way, there's not going to be any legitimate emails failing, and that sealed the deal, right? That uh, made the customer trust us, and having that ability to roll back was great for them. And what do you know? It wasn't even needed, right? So once we went to enforcement, it was actually a boring story, right? Nothing happened. Everything continued to flow through. All the services were passing, so um, everything was great. But just having the ability to do that was what convinced them to move to enforcement.
Cool. Yeah, and so yeah, the rollback is an important bit of it. Like if you do miss something, we're actually one of our brand new features is automatically highlighting a service that we think is legitimate that you might have missed. So that's coming very soon. I don't know if we exactly had that already, or if this is a completely brand new feature or just an update to a feature, but we were just talking about it internally yesterday. So that's kind of cool to be able to automatically highlight potential services that you might have missed and give you a way to easily authorize those. Since we don't have Catalan on the call, I can probably talk to this a little bit because I have helped some of our clients in higher ed as well. And higher ed is a tough space for DMARC because they have a lot of tech savvy admins who want to do a lot of stuff themselves. And so you have a decentralized or a diverse set of technology systems. Lots of old school email nerds, of which I am one at heart myself. So lots of postfix and forwarding and stuff that is not necessarily easy to update and make it fully comply with email requirements. And so, especially in the case of you have all of these different email servers. Everybody's got their little instance of postfix set up, got logs to look at and things to configure for all of those, amounting to a million plus emails a week, and figuring out which ones are actually set up in the SPF record already. In some of these cases, like a university will have a very broad swath of IP addresses, so they don't want to just put the whole thing in there, and so they've narrowed it down to what they think should be the mail servers for the given university community, and then they find, oh, this person over in this department set something else up. I was guilty of that too. Back when I worked with Sarah at Digital River, we had our own little server that was tracking emails, sending email notifications, and even tracking paid search. And that server sat at my feet under my desk and was not part of the SPF record or email authentication for our domain for sending those notifications. It's kind of stuff that it's fun to get it done, to get it to work. But when you have what we think of in the corporate world as shadow IT, where people just setting stuff on up on their own, it's great. You want people to have initiative. You want people to sort of problem solve, but you also have to make sure that that stuff authenticates properly. Any sort of open way of sending email where it's not restricted, that it might be good for somebody internal or in marketing, could also be exploited by a bad guy. So that's why it's so important to go through and sort of catalog all that stuff. And that's what Catalan was able to do in that case with one of our higher ed clients, where again, that is a rough environment where there's so many different entities sending. They're not all services you've heard of because again, they're homegrown. Somebody's got a Linux box and postfix and a bunch of Perl or PHP or whatever, Python nowadays, basically set up. And so how do you catalog all that? How do you monitor all of that? And that's where DMARC reporting is so useful, because DMARC reporting is sort of organizational level view of who's sending mail. You don't need the mail server logs. You don't need to look at each of these mail servers. You set up reporting. You set up P equals none and have the mailbox providers give you feedback to tell you what we see, what they see out there in the world sending email as you. A little bit of a tangent side thing there too. We actually worked with Google mid last year, and they added SMTP rejections, sort of bounce information for certain types of bounces to the DMARC reporting. This is stuff that in the past was only available in those SMTP logs, whether your ESP's platform logs or your postfix server logs or whatever you might have that are not centralized, that are all, each one is very specific to each server or service out there. So Google added some of this rejection level information to the DMARC reporting, meaning that without going to every server, they were now sending overall organizational level information on where rejections were happening because of DNS misconfiguration, IPs and servers not configured properly, or other technical bits that were previously stuff that you might see elevated levels of bounces if you were actually looking at the server logs. So that helped us find a few different instances where we had a client of a very big uh, uh, email marketing platform who changed one of their domain names, and they retired one of their prior domain names, but they had forgotten that that domain name was in use as the host name for some of their sending IP addresses. So basically, right, if they had something like 12 sending IPs and four of those were named with the domain name that they retired. And so since they were in a pool and they were using it to send all of their mail across all of these dozen or so IP addresses, it meant a good third of the mail they were sending was now getting rejected because of that misconfiguration. And so that's something that they weren't watching and they didn't know about until it popped up in their DMARC reporting. I also happened to trying to figure out how much I can tell you without saying their name, to a company who's an energy provider. We'll say that. A very large energy provider who sends a lot of emails about when it's time to pay your bill, what you owe for energy for the past month or the coming month, depending on how they bill it. And so millions of messages, almost all of their emails to Gmail subscribers, excuse me, were being rejected because of that DNS misconfiguration, because they were using a domain name that was set up in DNS in the past and now is not. And they didn't notice it. They didn't realize that all this mail was bouncing because it was a homegrown system to send those emails. And so they weren't tracking bounces for those properly, didn't have visibility into that. It's probably buried in some log somewhere. But the key here is that we were actually able to reach out to them and say, hey, you know that you're probably not getting through to any Gmail users at all because of this, right? And so we were amazed. We found a few other instances of this where big email senders, so some of them marketing, some of them retailers, some of them not, other stuff, but sending millions of messages that were getting rejected because of a DNS misconfiguration. And that's what just a lovely new example of what DMARC can also help you troubleshoot now, help you find email sender issues because of servers, DNS, etc., misconfigured that you might have missed before. Again, it's the data might have been in there somewhere buried in logs on specific servers, but if you didn't go looking for it, you wouldn't have found it. All right, it is time for a coffee break here. I'm taking a sip of this.
Yeah, and I just want to share a quick story, I think. So
Yeah.
this is a customer we're actually just onboarding, and I had like probably 2 calls with them until now. We just added the domains, we're getting the visibility, and with the help of the DMARC reports, we actually discovered a weird configuration, looks like a security breach pretty much. 2 subdomains in DNS, both pointing their CNAMEs with a CNAME, sorry, to 2 different domains. And on those domains, obviously external domains, someone was able to add SPF records, right? In which case, when using the domain in question to send mail, the SPF lookup will be done on the SPF record of the CNAME value, right? So this customer in question, they reached out to us. Obviously, we onboarded them. We appointed DMARC. We got visibility. After a couple of weeks, we were able to actually tell that in the reports we would see the SPF passing, right, and the emails that were being authenticated. And what happened was they went in DNS, they did an audit log. In 2022, someone added those records, left the company, but for those 2 subdomains in question, they still had the ability to manage the SPF because the CNAME was still in there. So people actually discovered reports and from our side, hey, they're passing SPF, and they're like, that's not possible. There's no records in there because obviously they removed the records like a week ago or something like that. So we immediately noticed that, hey, they're not passing anymore, they're failing. So that was pretty cool, right? But their thought was like, we need to gain trust in the platform. We need to gain trust in the fact that these reports that we're actually seeing here, they're real. The way I see it, these emails are passing until a certain point, then they stop passing. And is the reporting correct? It's incorrect. And obviously the reporting was correct, but the records then were removed, and we were able to explain them pretty well what exactly is happening. So,
And frankly, the reason that happened is because they were a new client, right? If they were already using us and they were doing Like there was one of my little videos a couple weeks ago was me talking about the January review and reset. We got through Q4, we got through Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Now it's January. Now it's time to review your sending infrastructure. Are there any old sending services that you don't use anymore that you can look in our platform and see, oh, this SPF record hasn't been accessed in months or years, or DKIM keys, this DKIM key hasn't been accessed in at least 6 months or whatever, and be able to see that there are services that are no longer actively in use. And so you can delete them, you can retire them, you can block them, set them up so they're no longer authorized to send email so that you don't have a situation like this earlier, like you referred to there, Cornell, because it's a perfect example of if you don't leave it behind in DNS, somebody can't hack it later, or like anything you leave there as that leaves the trail that somebody else can link into when they perhaps shouldn't be able to, but it points at somebody else's domain, points somewhere else that somebody could do something bad with it later. I think,
If
go ahead.
if I look up that domain in question right now, the one where it was pointing to, it has like a huge flattening, probably more than 100 plus different IPs. And obviously, on our customer, when you would see the reports, you could tell that these emails are originating from random countries. You'd see 100 today, 100 tomorrow, and it just wouldn't make any sense. They were all passing. It was looking good. We checked the domains. We dug them up, and we saw there's no SPF record on those. How are they passing, right? So it's just a matter of someone working in the organization, they leave. Um, it can happen, right? And same goes with SPF. If you don't clean it up, if you don't take care of it, teams are changing. And when a new team comes in, they're checking the SPF record, they're going to be like, we're not deleting anything. We don't want to mess anything up. That's probably 8 out of 10 customers we work with. When they join us, the first thing we do is check the SPF record. Do we use it as is, or can we build one using the reports that we're getting, right? So, and even clean them up using the reports at a later time. So it's different scenarios.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's where we can help really is we'll help you validate and verify everything that is in use now, and then we can help you periodically validate and verify from time to time as to understand if anything in DNS is no longer needed. There's a If you want to learn more about that, I think if you search for subdomailing on Google, you'll find people talking about these subdomain attacks, where basically an email service might change their name or go out of business or stop using a given domain name. They'll tell their clients to switch over. And maybe it was years ago, maybe it was 5+ years ago that they did this, but they left the old domain just sort of sitting there and doing nothing with it. And eventually the domain expires. They stop paying to renew it. And so bad guys see, oh, here's a chance to pick up a domain that used to be in broad use. And so they pick that up and they look to see what DNS queries do they get against the domain. It's actually pretty easy to do, especially if you're tech savvy. And there are a significant number of not so good people who are quite tech savvy. So they see what DNS queries come looking for that domain. And they realize, oh my goodness, I can set up SPF records. So I can set up DNS that will let me authenticate my IPs or somebody else's hacked IPs to say that I can send email as this domain, as your domain. And so this subdomain attack is basically like if some ESP went out of business and you left the little bits of it in your DNS, somebody else finds it later and they're able to send as you and make it pass authentication checks. It's kind of a worse nightmare when you think about it, because the mail is going to damage your domain reputation. It's going to look like it's passing authentication checks. It's going to potentially fool people into believing that it's from you. Now, eventually it'll get blocked because people doing bad things tends to accumulate a bad reputation and tends to get blocked over time. But a significant chunk is going to get through first. Not everybody's going to block it with the same rate of success eventually. And so that's bad news for your brand and for your domain and your domain reputation. Take another coffee break here. If anybody has any questions about DMARC and all that happy stuff about how that all works, happy to answer those. Decided not to just sort of blindly read the stuff on the slides there. Um, some of this is on our blog already, and we're certainly happy to answer questions about it. But I talked about the university use case. The other use case there too was a government entity, and as both the university and government entities are perfect examples of really complex organizations with lots of servers, lots of services, lots of different departments going off in their own direction, doing their own thing. And so that's where it gets super complex super quickly, way above and beyond the just starting with your own DNS record. Again, if you only got one domain and you only send your one newsletter, maybe you've also got Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. Yeah, absolutely. You could manage DMARC manually by yourself. It's not everybody needs an enterprise level DMARC solution, but I think a lot of people do have a complex enough configuration that they ought to consider it. So, and one thing that's kind of a fun add-on for DMARC is BIMI. And I wanted to show a quick example of that. As you may or may not know, Valimail is now owned by DigiCert, and DigiCert is one of the certificate authorities that that offers up verified mark certificates and common mark certificates to help you verify who you are so that you can show a logo in the inbox in kind of a unique place that not everybody has access to. Not every mailbox provider supports this. Unfortunately, Microsoft does not support this. But Gmail, Yahoo, Apple, Fastmail, and a bunch of other mailbox providers do support showing a BIMI logo. And so you sign up for this. When you're at DMARC protection, at quarantine or reject, you can do this add-on where you're able to publish a logo, a BIMI record in DNS, and make your logo show up in, for example, in Gmail. And if you have that verified mark certificate to go along with that, you even get a little blue verified check mark that the user can click on and say that this is verified, that this actually came from, in our case, Valimail. Show the company name and show proof that you've been verified. So that verification step is super important to help drive trust, but it also helps drive engagement. Our testing and Yahoo's testing, back when they were called Verizon, they were owned by Verizon for a hot second, and they did testing of this in their inbox, and they showed that it drove a significant boost in engagement, in interactions. So that's a fun thing to look at there is sort of the icing on top. If you think of the carrot and stick approach to protecting email domains, perhaps the stick is that we're gonna protect the domain against people trying to sneak through. But the carrot, the more positive outcome of implementing email authentication is that BIMI logo. Implement that, and you get a little bit of a boost there. And so we are coming to just about the end of the webinar. We will happy to answer your questions. And we've got one here from Will. Let me talk about that. Most importantly, when is my train going to pull into the station? Yeah, I think I thought that would be a fun thing to do. So there's a little loop. That's an actual red line train from here in Chicago.
I can answer
But
that if that's okay.
yeah.
So yeah, that's actually a great question. The idea is that, first of all, if you want to authenticate your emails and be DMARC compliant, you need either SPF authentication or DKIM authentication. There are some services, for example, that might support only one of these two authentication methods, right? In which case, there's nothing else you need to do. You're just setting up DKIM, and that's it. That service will pass DMARC authentication with DKIM alignment, right? But then there are services that do support both. And in that case, we tend to recommend that you should most definitely try to set up both SPF and DKIM authentication. For example, SPF, from my perspective, and some other people will agree, is not as reliable as DKIM, right? So if you have a service that supports both SPF and DKIM and you have only SPF configured, you should definitely go ahead and configure DKIM as well.
Yeah, and that's, for example, SPF is not friendly to email forwarding. And SPF
Yeah.
is based on the basically what's called last hop. So you're checking what server just connected to you to send you an email message, and forwarding means that you forward an email is transmitted through additional hops, through additional servers to get to you. So that blows up SPF. And so uh, to your point, when you have both DKIM and SPF, it's sort of belt and suspenders. And another real world example of that, basically, when I worked for a big email marketing platform, basically what would happen is somebody would configure an email server and forget to implement DKIM. Back in the day when all the stuff was manual and having 3,200 servers meant you had to copy and paste a config file into 3,200 different places. And so somebody would forget to set up DKIM. And so email messages would go out for a client where they wouldn't have DKIM authentication set up because it actually has to touch the message, calculate a cryptographic signature of the message, a little bit of the signature goes in a hidden header. So that part is skipped. But because SPF works differently, it was still there. It's in the DNS automatically for the domain or subdomain. So those marketing messages were still passing SPF, even though they were not set up to authenticate with DKIM. So that meant that they were still getting to the inbox and they were still passing DMARC. So that was sort of an important way that they sort of help each other out. Now, future state here is a little different. Like uh, I'm involved is sort of overstating it. Anybody can show up to the IETF, participate in these internet standards groups, but I participate in the one for DKIM 2. There's a mailing list for it, and you can search for that and one if you want to learn more about what DKIM 2 is. And there's sort of a future state there where DKIM 2 might be able to handle all this stuff itself and not not need to uh, you might not need to have SPF, and forwarding might work a little better, and how you get reporting based on this stuff, or how do you ensure that you're fully covered might change in the future. But we've got a ways to go before we get there. And so right now you want to do SPF and DKIM and DMARC, and even like Microsoft and some of the other Membox providers mandate that if you are a bulk sender, you have to do all three. So even my old example of, hey, SPF got us through a pinch because we messed up DKIM, that might not even work very well going forward in the future if you're a big sender where a mailbox provider is kind of requiring all of it. All right. Um, Val, Cornell, any last thoughts here before we wrap her up?
Well, to wrap it up from the way it ended to the back to the beginning, right? BIMI needs DMARC, DMARC needs visibility. You can't do these without having the other. Well, DMARC and visibility can be done alone, right? But if you think of BIMI, you're going to need the other two. So yeah, get that visibility. Make sure you are using a tool that allows you to get that visibility that you need, right? So you don't have to look up those row reports. And with the use of the visibility, make sure you get to enforcement, keep your domain protected and clean.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And also, regarding BIMI, in case some people don't know, they now have VMC and CMC, right? So for the folks who don't have a trademark for their domains, it's easier now to get BIMI via CMC. So you don't need a trademark, you just need your logo to be visible on your website for at least 12 months. And that way you can have it visible to your receivers as well by implementing BIMI, right?
And as you might have
And
noticed, the difference between those, sorry, Al, is that the VMC gives you a blue check mark,
Right.
but the CMC doesn't give you the blue check mark, but it will
Just the
still
logo.
display your logo. Exactly.
and if you think it might be valuable for us to have a sort of an idiot's guide to BIMI webinar in the future, feel free to drop me an email and let me know because we've been thinking about that. And somebody did ask, "Hey, where can I find just how do I walk through this process?" We don't even have to necessarily make it only Mail's process specific. Of course, we'll talk about our platform, but we're happy to talk more about the tech as well. So, got one more question here.
Yeah,
Hey,
I
this is a good
reviewed that
question too.
question. It's a really good one, and it actually just by looking at it real quick, it might just take us back to Maggie, right? Google has some requirements, and those requirements are that your emails should be SPF or DKIM authenticated, right? You need alignment for one of them, but authentication must be there, right? And Al is going to take us back to that page where we can review it. So this is what looks like it might have happened with the email in question. There was no SPF or DKIM validation, right, for the email, and then Google automatically denied its delivery.
Yeah, and if you look at it there's an IPv6 address too, and that's another stumbling point that where people often struggle when they're setting up email authentication, especially if somebody might sometimes try to get a little use a little bit of their own tech expertise and try to handle it themselves, where people will manually set up an SPF record and only put in IPv4 addresses and not IPv6. That's a whole other thing. I'm not going to go down the hole of explain the difference between the two types of IP addresses, but what this boils down to is, so if you're sending, it looks like you're sending from Outlook to Gmail or the other way around. But whatever your domain is, it's probably that you don't have SPF or DKIM set up in that service. Whether if you're a Microsoft 365 user, then you need to go into there and in the admin panel for that domain for Microsoft and set up that email authentication. Same deal with Google if it's Google Workspace. If you also little bits of random stuff like that, sometimes it can be spoofing. It could be somebody else sending a fake email as you. And so if it's not you, and if you set up email authentication already properly and you're seeing that error, then you kind of know that DMARC's doing its job. And so it's not necessarily your problem. Oh, okay. It was sent from SendGrid. Yeah, that is a tough one. Now, keep in mind, it could be forwarding too. And you see that there's always going to be this long little tail of like somebody can set up their Gmail account to forward to somewhere else. And so because of how bounces work, there's this thing called VERP for bounces, variable envelope return path, where they do an encoded bounce message specific to each type of each individual email sent. So the message can get forwarded to another destination, but that other destination bounces it back, and the bounce will come all the way back, and it'll come from the wrong place, and it'll confuse you. Where I had seen that before is like, I know I sent to Gmail, but I got a bounce from Yahoo. So if it's that, and if it's just onesie twosie things, it's probably just email forwarding. If you're seeing thousands of them, I would almost be worried that, hey, is something misconfigured? Am I not sending who I think I'm sending to? Another example of that is some platforms will have BCC messaging for compliance reasons. They want to keep a copy of every outbound message sent. They will do that by BCCing a hidden mailbox. And sometimes that mailbox fills up or is misconfigured, or the send process to that gets blocked. And so you will get a weird bounce message from the wrong server. So you think you're sending again to Gmail, but you get a bounce back from Microsoft because it's the BCC address is at a Microsoft domain, for example. So that's a tricky one, but it's kind of fun to troubleshoot that, and hopefully that helps a little bit. Let's see. Valentin, any last thoughts from you before we wrap her up here?
No, I was just getting into the into the question basically. I was looking at that IP. It looks like a Google IP, so I think it's in line with what you were saying about auto forwarding, right, on the recipient side, and it's normal for the email to bounce, right?
Yeah, and you're always going to see a handful of those from what I call weird stuff. So if somebody is doing weird stuff, you will see weird bounces once in a while. If it's just 10 of them, you're probably okay. If it's many thousands of them, then I'd be worried that something strange is happening. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Hey, we value your feedback and thoughts here. Feel free to drop me an email at al.iverson@valamail.com. And with thoughts about this, suggestions for a future webinar. Again, if you want us to talk about BIMI or something else, drop us a line. Happy to take that into consideration. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. Thank you, Cornell and Valentin, for participating. I appreciate you guys very much. Everybody, please have a great day.